Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Bethel Church podcast. This, as always, is a podcast that is designed to equip you to connect, love, disciple, and serve in your communities, in your families, your homes, and in your church and all around you. We are excited that you have chosen to listen into this, whether you are tuning in live right now. If you're tuning in live, feel free to drop a comment. We can see those as we're chatting here live this morning or this afternoon or this noon. This is noon. I am joined, as always, by pastor here at Bethel Baptist Church in Westminster, South Carolina, Jeromy Dean. How are you, Jeromy?
I'm doing good, Josh. Doing good. Excited for the topic today. I'm excited too because we just had outdoor worship this past Sunday, and it was great to see people face to face and be outside, and because we've been restricted and quarantined for so long, it's I'm just still kind of feeling the effects of that gathering. It's been really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was really great to see people. I mean, I joked a lot even on Sunday that it was just nice to see other people together. And it was a really, really special morning in a lot of ways. It was a step forward for us, and we're excited about doing this for the near future and kind of seeing where we go with it.
Yeah, I am too. And in fact, some of our small groups are starting to meet together. I know our group met last night at Joe's house, and we had probably 10 or 11 people gathered under his carport, and we're slowly getting to those ways, but we're doing so safely, social distancing, and keeping those things in mind for sure. So,
yeah, we're doing our best as we have this whole time to do the best ministry we can, do the best growing we can, and be the most responsible we can, which is
absolutely
a fun balance. Today we're doing something which I say is a little bit different, but it isn't in terms of like what we believe as a church, but we haven't necessarily done this on this podcast, and we are just going to do like kind of just a Bible study, and we're going to dive in to a psalm. We're going to be in Psalm 95, and the reason we kind of landed here was that we have kind of mapped out where we're headed with the podcast over the next several weeks. And this week we kind of wanted to focus on worship. We just last week talked about preparing for our actual outdoor worship at Bethel. And so this week we wanted to just dig into the, theology and the topic of worship. And we were trying to decide how exactly we wanted to go about that. And I think Jeromy was like, well, what if we found, a psalm that talks about worship and goes into worship? And so we just kind of did some digging, and we landed on Psalm 95. And that's kind of where we're going to camp out today.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. So we're going to walk you through it kind of verse by verse, and really there's some really great things in the psalm to draw out about worship, but it has everything to do with how we come into worship. And it's very much, you can kind of think about this as an invitation type psalm. And we were just talking before we got on here, about invitations, and we were kind of thinking through the question, what's the greatest invitation that you've received? And for me, as we were talking about, I was thinking about, I'm not special. There's nothing unique about me. I haven't really been invited to really, 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 really great, important things. But the invitations that have been special to me are those like weddings. I've been invited to be a part of weddings. I've officiated some weddings by invitation. I've been invited to attend and support the bride and the groom because of being a family or being friends, and that's a really special time in people's lives, right? A very momentous occasion, and to be invited to be a part of that and celebrate with that, it's a big deal. And I was thinking too, I used to be a school teacher. I taught up in Clover, and I loved working with students and teaching. And there was one student that I taught probably 3 or 4 times in that 4-year span. Now, granted, it was not the same course. I taught them different courses. They didn't fail my class like 3 times. But we built a bond and we built a relationship. And I remember I had left the school and had gone on into ministry. And when it came time for that student to graduate, you're given a limited number of tickets, right? But that student invited me, gave me a ticket to come to their graduation, which was pretty special, and so that's pretty neat. How about you, Josh? Were you invited to anything special?
It's funny, the more you talk, the more I just relate to all of those things, because in my time in both young adulthood and in student ministry, those are two, events that happened, especially weddings lately over the last 2 years, really the last two plus years since right before Jenny and I got married. it felt like everyone we knew was getting married, and I just remember every time kind of the lead up to that, it was fun to know that you were a part of it, and that everyone was excited, and you were getting ready, and it was going to be a big party, and everyone was going to have fun, and you knew that you were going to get to be a part of it. I think that alone, that feeling of inclusion and being a part of it and being invited to it was as fun, if not more exciting, than the actual wedding or the actual party itself. So,
Wow,
yeah, I definitely relate to that.
And I think the opposite. Just kind of listening to you, if you're not invited, we go back to those days when we were teenagers. If there was a party or there was something going on with your friends and you weren't invited, how devastating that felt. How much of a loser I always felt like I was.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because now I just want to get something off my own chest. So in middle school, oh my gosh, I'll never forget it. Every Friday night, I was aware that this group of kids were going to the movies, and I was never invited, and that was fine. I just kind of accepted that. I was like, I'm not cool enough. That's fine. But I remember specifically this one girl bringing it up to me to tell me that they were going out of their way to invite this other person that never got invited. But they were telling me this, and I was like, hello, what about me? And so I was like, that's great for this other guy. His name was Will. I'm glad he got invited. I'm glad Will got invited. But I was like, why? Do you not hear yourself? I mean, we're 8th graders, so, it's crazy enough that I had that awareness. But, anyway.
I sense a little bitterness, maybe a little saltiness still about that.
Yeah.
It's okay. We'll be praying for you.
Yeah.
Confess your sins. That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
All right. So I feel like since we're going to walk through this psalm, if you're listening out there, you're live, you got your Bible with you, great. Maybe you can turn to Psalm 95. If not, just listen. I'm going to read the psalm to you. And then, like I said, we're going to go back and kind of unpack some of the key thoughts that are there. So Psalm 95 starts out, "O come, let us sing to the Lord. Let us make a joyful noise to the rock of our salvation. Let us come into his presence with thanksgiving. Let us make a joyful noise to him with songs of praise. For the Lord is a great God, a great King above all gods. In his hand are the depths of the earth, the heights of the mountains are his also. The sea is his, for he made it, and his hands formed the dry land. O come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker. For he is our God, and we are the people of his pasture, the sheep of his hand. Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts, as at Meribah, or as on the day at Massah in the wilderness, when your fathers put me to the test and put me to the proof, though they had seen my work. For 40 years I loathed that generation and said, they are a people who go astray in their heart, and they have not known my ways. Therefore I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest." Now, that psalm, where you kind of reading through that, starts off with a lot of excitement, a lot of exuberance. Kind of ends, it sounds like, on a very somber, solemn kind of tone, and we'll kind of walk through that a little bit. But the first thing that I kind of saw when I was reading through this psalm was the word "come." The word "come" is mentioned in verse 1. It says, "O come, let us sing to the Lord." In verse 2, you see it again repeated, "Let us come into his presence." And then in verse 6, it says, "O come, let us worship and bow down." As I studied a little bit, that word "come" actually means something different in each one. And in verse 1, it says, "Come, let us sing to the Lord. Let us make a joyful noise to the rock of our salvation." God is inviting us to worship. He is inviting us to come as we go. This idea of come is kind of walking up, coming into, going along the path as you walk, that sort of thing. And so it's this idea that as we come, as we are walking to the Lord, while we are walking in worship, we are singing, we have joy. And that joy is because of our salvation, that God is the rock, the strength, the firm foundation of our being made right with God. And man, that brings us joy. We sing of that. We sing praises of God for that.
Yeah, why don't you actually continue on here? Because what I want to say kind of encompasses these first 5 verses, really.
Okay, yeah. Yeah. So with that, with singing, with joy, I know you'll say something about that in a second. Our salvation, what God has done for us, is the reason that we praise Him. It's the reason that we sing. It's the reason we have joy in our hearts, and the world can't come against that. And that in verse 2, we see again that repetition says, "Let us come into His presence." We're thinking about worship, this invitation that we are invited to come into worship. But in verse 2, it says we're coming into His presence. We just did outdoor worship. Many of us are used to coming indoors before the coronavirus hit and worshiping in the worship center, in the sanctuary, and being gathered together. And we had these routines of getting ready for church and preparing for that, and coming on Sundays and sometimes on Wednesdays to be able to worship together. And whenever we do, what the psalmist is telling us is that when we come to worship, we are coming into the presence of someone. That word "come" is not just as you're walking like it is in verse 1. It is now, as you're coming to worship, know that you're coming before a person. And what's that person like? The psalmist goes on to describe him. He says, when we come to His presence with thanksgiving, let us make a joyful noise. In verse 3, for the Lord is a great God, a great King above all gods. So there's no one greater than God. There's no king, no authority greater than God. And in verses 4 and 5, He kind of describes His power, His authority, that the whole earth is in His hands, that the mountains are His, that the seas are His, right? That's the God we serve. There's no one greater. So when we come into worship, we are coming with joy and singing and praise because of what God has done for us, how He has restored us, redeemed us, shown His grace and His love to us. But we're also coming before Him and understanding that really that He is God, way up high, and we're not.
Yeah. And so a lot of this, of what you've described, is really, and a lot of this psalm is the why of why we worship. And you talked a little bit about the singing, and that's what I kind of want to talk about for a second. But this whole psalm, but especially this first chunk here, is a call to sing. And this is what I'm going to say might sound weird, but like, we often categorize worship time as singing, which is true, and that's what I'm going to circle back to. But then for some people, not necessarily me, because I'm a musical person, but like then some people often cast the singing and the musical worship aside because they think, oh, that's not my gifting, that's not my calling. But we see here that singing is literally a spiritual act, and it's something that we are, always commanded to do. Music focuses our brains in a unique way. It engages us in a unique way. But the heart of worship being the things that our hearts love and have affection for, and the things that we're paying attention to, music has a way of melding all those things together in a powerful way. So if you're someone that, always makes the joke about, well, I can't make a joyful noise, that's not true. You may not be able to carry a tune. That might be true, but you still can sing your praises to God through music, because it's not about skill. It's about heart, and it's about where your focus is and where your love and your attention are. And music has an easy way to focus our brain. Sometimes we can zone out through music too, but like, I think that when we put our focus on what we're doing through musical worship, it comes together in a powerful way that we are able to express our worship to God in a way that draws us nearer to Him as He draws near to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody throughout history, the music is all over Scripture. Everybody throughout history has connected through music. And with music, I love is that it helps us with our emotions, with that joy, with that desire for God, to be able to express it, not even in just the words, but in the fluctuations of the songs and things that are heard, and presented that. Music is is one of the tools of worship. I think about when we look at worship on Sunday mornings and that time when we are gathered together corporately as a church, and we have worship through song, we have worship through giving, we have worship through the word of God being preached. We have worship through response when people come and they pray and they respond to God in faith after the things that have gone on. We have worship in prayer, when we're actually as a people communicating to God and talking with God. I mean, there's many different tools of worship, and music is one of those. And it's we're able to connect with God in worship through these different tools. It's not just the words we say. It's like you said, the heart of worship that comes out, what's in our heart and how we're expressing that and praising God and pouring that out to him in those different ways. And two, I also want to remember that worship is not just what happens on Sunday mornings. Worship is our lifestyle. Worship is and Josh, you have a unique way of saying this. I think it's what our heart's affection and our mind's attention. Yeah, expressed. I mean, that's really what it is, and it's something that we do every day of our lives. That our lives are a spiritual act of worship to God each day. And so we definitely, as we read Psalm 95, want to think about this as we're coming together in worship. But we also want to remember that as we're coming Monday through Saturday, we are approaching this holy, great God, this great King. Each and every day we are in his presence.
And one more thing, this isn't necessarily about music, but a lot of the psalm has covered now the how and the why, and it also and this is the who and the who and the why are kind of together, but I don't want to miss on some of the other things. It talks a lot about God's creating power or creation power. The sea is his, for he made it, and his hands formed the dry lands. In his hand are the depths of the earth. The height of the mountains are his also. We serve a big God, and we worship a big God that as the song once said, he has the whole world in his hands.
Yeah.
And that's a fun thing for us to sing. And it's funny that song kind of comes to my head in this because, I spent so much time when I was teaching preschool for a few years singing that song. And, it's a rich theological truth that he does have the whole world in his hands, and he did create the whole world in his hands. And that is another reason of the who and the why we worship through song or however.
Yeah, and that's a humbling thought because we can't wrap our minds around the idea that the world is in his hands. We look at the stars, we look at the planets and the galaxies that are out there. Man, it's astonishing, it's amazing, it's incredible to see all that God has made, and yet he's bigger than that. It really shows us how small we are, that he is God and we are not, which kind of leads into that to verse 6. Not. Yeah, absolutely. The word come is repeated again in verse 6. And this idea of come is that you're coming with something. You're coming to bring something. When we come to worship, we're not to come empty-handed. Now, and let me help you understand what I mean. What I don't mean is that we have to always bring something physical to God. There is a time for that. I do believe that God, that all that we have really belongs to God, and he's just leased it to us to steward well, right? So our finances, our resources, all the things we have really belong to him. They're not ours. And God has blessed us with that, and he wants us to use it for his kingdom purposes and his glory, right? And so we bring our tithe, we bring our offerings to God in worship as cheerful givers as the Lord has led us, right? So there are times when we bring physical things in worship, right? But that's not really what he's talking about, because when you go on, it says, let us worship, let us bow down, let us kneel before the Lord our Maker. Again, we have this position, this contrast that God is maker, he's creator, he is on high, and we are not. And our posture before him is to come with worship, that we are putting him first, ascribing worth to him. That's what the worship literally means. But we're bowing down and we're kneeling. We are humbling ourselves before this great God, this great King, and we are submitting ourselves as servants to his great purposes because he made us. He created us. He has our best interest at heart. He wants what is best for us. And so we come and worship, really offering ourselves. The idea of coming not empty-handed is that we are giving our whole lives to God in worship. So when we come on Sundays, and that's the attitude we have. When we go really through Monday and Saturday and all these other days, we're supposed to have this attitude of humility to follow his lead. And I'll tell you, man, I don't always get it right. I get it wrong every day, but what a reminder.
Yeah. I mean, this back half of this psalm, I mean, the whole thing, but this back half is a real reminder, just like, what are we bringing, what are we coming with? I love the through line here of the idea of like these different forms of the word come. And I'm just kind of thinking through it. Sorry if I don't sound super polished here, because I'm just kind of thinking through it as I listen to Jeromy talk about it, and it's really good.
It's interesting, man. The song ends in a very solemn, kind of somber way. To kind of understand what he says in verse 8, he says at the very end of verse 7, he says, "Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as you did at Meribah, as on the day at Massah in the wilderness." That he is reminding them of, and I don't know for sure. We could probably dig a little bit more and find out like when this psalm was written. It could have been written during the time of the Exodus in the wilderness. And if that was the case, then the people hearing this psalm, they experienced what happened in those places at Meribah and Massah. And what happened is, you can go back to Exodus 17 and read about it, but the people complained and they grumbled. The people of Israel, God had led them under Moses to come out of Egypt. He had freed them from slavery, and they were on their way to the promised land. And out there in the heat and thirsty and hungry and walking for a long time, even though they've seen miracles from God, he has done some awesome things for them, things we've not seen ourselves. I mean, it'd just be incredible to see what God did, how God brought them out of Egypt. And yet they start complaining. It'd be better for us if we just stayed in Egypt. We'd rather die in Egypt than die here in this wilderness. God, why did you bring us out here? They were complaining and they were grumbling. And they had hardened their hearts against God. Instead of, they no longer humbled themselves before him. They were no longer ascribing worth to him. They were complaining against him. Why did you do this to us? And he says in these verses, do not do that. Don't go back to the way you were before when you tested me and tried to challenge whether I am who I say I am and will do what I promised to do. Don't quarrel over things, right? Man, don't we do that in worship? I mean, don't we do that every day? Aren't we guilty of that? We come into worship expecting God to just fill us up and do for us what we want. And when it doesn't work out the way we think it ought to, when that message didn't ring in my ears the way I wanted, it wasn't encouraging like I thought it was going to be. The songs didn't really sound good this week, or they didn't sing the kind of songs I like to hear and all that kind of stuff. We were so selfish. God, why did you do this? Why is this happening? We throw our arms up. We come with the wrong attitude in worship. But I think the thrust of this song is that, one, we are invited into worship to come before a holy God, to ascribe worth to him. And then it says, today, if you hear his voice, don't ignore it. Don't dismiss it. Come under what he is showing you, what he is teaching you. And that's worship. That's following him.
Yeah. And so often we are, like you said, all guilty of like coming to corporate worship with the attitude of what can I get out of this, instead of where can I meet God in this? I think that's maybe a different way to think about it, because that's kind of the best of both worlds, where there is part of worship that you do want to gain from it. I mean that we don't have a God that's just trying to He's a God that gives good things, gives good gifts. We need to come to worship with an attitude of where can we meet God today? How can we meet God? What place do I need to get to be in a place to worship God with my whole heart? I think that's where, ultimately a bigger blessing will come and a bigger growth would come for you personally in your worship, in your walk. And as the body, if we all imagine the power of a worship service where everyone comes with an attitude of where can I meet God today? Where can we come together in this place and meet God together? I think that would, we talk about powerful worship services and big moments and things that happen. Just imagine where, what God's going to do when we're all, surrendering our hearts to Him in worship.
Yeah. Yeah. And that one phrase, today, if you hear His voice, and it's this idea that we come expecting that when we come before God, when we come humble before Him and bow before Him, God will show up. He's there in our midst. He will speak into our lives. We just got to be humble to receive it. And when we are, and like you're saying, when we are as a people and not just as an individual, but we are collectively, we can't imagine what God will do through His church to minister in our own lives and our families, but also into our community.
Yep. It's true. It's true. And it's something that, I feel like that over the course of my life, I've had times where I've really experienced, the fullness and the richness of corporate worship and personal worship. But I've also, had times where I'm, coasting along or in a rut or going through the motions or whatever that is. Be encouraged that, life is not a series of just all highs, because you have the perfect attitude and you come, to worship every week in the perfect headspace, ready to, give your heart to God. That's not it. But we're saying is that, we're in this together.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Awesome.
Well, that was really enjoyable. I think that was really beneficial. I hope that anyone that is listening to this live has enjoyed this live. If it has been a blessing to you, feel free to share it. Share it at any time, privately or publicly on Facebook or whatever social medias that you use. We would love to continue to get the word out about this podcast beyond just our church, but even within our church. We feel like, there's more people that we could be reaching with this resource. There's a lot of things going on at Bethel in the next coming weeks that we're really excited about. Once again, we'll be an outdoor worship this Sunday morning at 10 o'clock outside the church. I think that weather's supposed to be good this weekend, so we should be good on that front. Of course, if anything changes, we'll let you know. If you cannot join us outside on Sunday morning, we still will be streaming an indoor worship service that you can watch at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning. So take advantage of that if you can't join us on Sunday morning in person. And one more thing that I want to plug that I've been slowly getting the word out and people are hopefully getting excited about it. But next Wednesday night, the youth group, Fuel, is going to actually meet in person. And I'm very excited about that. We're going to meet from 6:30 to 7:30 outside. It's going to be, we're just taking kind of baby steps, but we're also taking all the precautions we need to be safe and responsible, but also be able to gather together and that I can actually see my students. And I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, it's good.
And to I think that, in this, all of us have been tired of Zoom, and I am also tired of Zoom. And so I'm excited to just, be able to connect with, our leaders and our students in person on Wednesday night. So if you're a student, or if you are a student, or if you're a parent and your student doesn't usually come, but you think that they should get plugged in, this is a perfect time. So Wednesday night, 6:30 outside of the education building, pretty much out in the field where we meet on Sunday morning now.
That's going to be great. It's going to be great. Man, I'm excited for it. I know we're kind of taking baby steps to get back together, but it's so good to be with people and to gather. And so, hey, check us out. Check our website out, lovingbethel.com. The resources there. The podcasts are put up there. The blog is there. We usually put a worship guide with questions and things from the sermon and things for you and your family to do some discipleship at home with. Check those out. If you have any topics for this podcast you'd like to hear, things that you want to, even if it's a passage you want us to kind of dig into that passage a little bit, we'd be glad to. Just put that in the comments or send us an email. We look forward to doing that in the future.
Absolutely. And until next time, we will see you on Sunday morning or see you back here next Thursday. You guys
All
have a
right.
good afternoon.
See ya.